We are going to start your new year, your new decade off with a bang. Tana and I are going to do a 6-week live class. So starting January 21st, every Tuesday, we're going to be with you for an hour. And at the end, we're going to give away over $20,000 in prizes. We look forward to helping you kick off this new year by becoming brain health revolutionaries. Welcome back. We're here with Dr. Kabran Chapek, and we're talking about traumatic brain injury, concussions, his new book, Concussion Rescue. Kabran, you and I have shared a lot of patients over the last 6 years, and I'm always very grateful for you because, I help with the psychiatric stuff, and you make sure to put their body in a healing environment. And together we created the mnemonic Bright Minds, which is really a functional medicine approach to mental health, brain health. And we've talked about Bright Minds a lot. But go through each of those risk factors as it relates to concussion rescue. So B is for blood flow, and we see that on the scans, right? We see low blood flow 91% of the time in the frontal lobes, which, that just hurts everything in your life because it hurts decision making.
No, it's a brilliant mnemonic, and the more I use it with patients, the more sense it makes as we apply it to the different conditions that we see. And so, of course, blood flow. Yeah, the vascularization, we need more blood flow if there's been a brain injury. The R is for retirement. And as an aging brain, as I said earlier, highest rates of brain injury are those either young adults, 0 to 17, and then over 65. And the brain is more vulnerable, but there's also falls are higher in these populations. I is for inflammation. As we talked earlier, there's a cascade of inflammatory events that's like a fire that hasn't been put out and continues to smolder for months and sometimes years after brain injury. Genetics. So learn this from you, ApoE4. People who have the ApoE4 genotype are more likely to suffer long-term consequences of brain injury because the ApoE4 allele is a gene. It's known as the Alzheimer's gene. But what it really means is that this person who has ApoE4 is more pro-inflammatory. They're going to have more inflammation in their body than someone who doesn't. And so it's so much more important to do all of the things we're talking about.
So get this, Kabran. 2004, I wrote my book, Preventing Alzheimer's, with neurologist Rod Schenkel. And when I reviewed that literature, Rod and I came out and said, if you're going to let your child play a contact sport, you first need to know their ApoE4 status. So it's just a simple blood test.
Brilliant.
That, ApoE gene type, so APO gene type, and it'll tell you, are you an E2? So it's 2, 3, or 4. Or, do you have 2 2s, 2 3s, 2 4s? And if you have 1 4, you probably shouldn't let your child play contact sports because there's a study in boxers. Those boxers who had one of the E4 genes started to show cognitive impairment after their 11th fight.
Wow.
Those boxers who had no E4 genes actually did not show cognitive impairment until after their 30th fight.
Big difference.
It's because they're producing more inflammation faster? Is that...
Well, and it's also involved in cholesterol metabolism as well, but it increases the risk of cognitive impairment with whatever insults you have. And I would bet, because we've also been talking about general anesthesia, people don't know this. General anesthesia for vulnerable people, it's a brain injury. It's an assault on their brain, and probably people have the E4 gene have more damage
Oh, interesting.
from anesthesia. And these risk factors stack. They link, they stack, and then they attack you. And so low blood flow, if you're older, that's worse. If you have inflammation because you have a highly processed diet, if you have genetic vulnerabilities for anxiety, depression, Alzheimer's disease, the E4 gene. So recovery is really dealing with all of that. And then the T is toxins, which I actually learned from your mentor, Joe Pizzorno. He's got this great book, The Toxin Solution, to scare the socks off you.
Yeah, he was great.
But we really live in a toxic environment, don't we?
We do. We're kind of surrounded, kind of bathed in it. So we all need to do things that help us detoxify, whether it's doing saunas regularly or taking our antioxidants, vitamin C, eating our vegetables. But
Where does hyperbaric oxygen fall in here?
So blood flow. I'm so
With his
happy
treatment,
you
yeah.
brought that up.
I mean, I got one in my house because I'm so in love with it. I go in every day. It's when I meditate. It just clears my brain. So it just is so peaceful. And I know it's doing something positive.
if I could only do one thing to help heal the brain from brain injury, it would be hyperbaric oxygen. If I was only limited to one tool, it's that powerful, and it doesn't help everyone, and it doesn't help as much if you just do that. But it is a powerful tool.
But if you combine it with the rest of your protocol, then it's very powerful.
That much better.
And so M is either mind storms, these abnormal electrical activity, common in head injuries because the temporal lobes where they come from sit right behind a sharp bony ridge that needs a bumper guard. So I'm praying for that. Or mental health challenges. If you have ADD, you're more likely to get a brain injury because of the impulsivity, as we talk about Haven, my granddaughter. I mean, I don't know that she has ADD, but it wouldn't surprise me how busy she is. And
She's like a wind-up
the
toy.
impulsivity increases the risk of brain injury. But if you never had ADD until the car accident you got into when you were a teenager, and now you have ADD, that's not really ADD, that's traumatic brain injury where you have frontal lobe trouble.
I had a nurse she wanted to become a nurse. Name was Jane. We'll call her Jane. She was 35 and she thought she had adult ADD, but she had been in a car accident and she had difficulty focusing, was given Dexedrine as stimulant, helped a little bit, but she couldn't study until she got treatment for also her brain injury. And then she could focus and study and was able to complete nursing school.
So important. And then the I is immunity and infections, which you and I have seen is so important. But some autoimmune problems are really caused by gluten and dairy and corn and soy. So doing an elimination diet can actually be really, diet's just a central piece to all of this. And then, hormones. So N is neurohormone deficiencies. And you write about that in Concussion Rescue about how testosterone, progesterone, thyroid can all be off after a head injury. Why is that?
Yeah, great question. So 25 to 50% of people with a history of brain injury have damage to the pituitary gland. It's the master hormone gland sitting in the center of the brain, in the sella turcica, the sort of bony pocket, and it can be damaged through the same ways other parts of the brain can be damaged. And if it's taken out, it's not sending the signal to the other parts of the other hormone systems, so thyroid, adrenals, the testes for testosterone, for women, ovaries, estrogen, progesterone, and also growth hormone. So the top two, we typically see growth hormone deficiencies and sex hormone deficiencies, whether that's testosterone or estrogen, progesterone. And this is especially high in the veterans with blast injuries. So I think that concussive force gets to the pituitary in particular. It can penetrate more deeply. So it's important to screen. And I talk about all the labs that should be done in the book, but checking all of these hormones, but also the pituitary hormones, because they're often damaged. And these can be corrected. And it's like we need those growth factors. That's kind of how I characterize them. These are growth factors for healing. You know, we have the nutrients for antioxidant and feeding the system that way. But then also we need to have sort of the growth factors for healing as well with the hormones. It's like two halves of a coin.
So important to get your hormones checked. And then D is diabesity. 70% of us are overweight, 40% of us are obese. I published 2 studies that show as your weight goes up, the size and function of your brain goes down. So you're more likely to have lasting trouble if you have trouble with your weight. And you're more likely to have problems with your weight after a head injury, because if 91% of head injuries affect your frontal lobes, then, you know, in our society with this incredibly bad food, you're just going to make a bad decision. And just think about it. When you think about the magnitude of this problem, every year, what did you say? 3 million people go to the ER for a head injury, and most of them live. And that means over the last 40 years, there may be over 100 million people walking around with the effects of concussions.
And Daniel, I think it's so much higher because those are just the people going to the ER.
I was going to say, a lot of people don't go. Homeless people don't go.
Like you didn't go, and you had a very brutal car accident. And people don't think of the whiplash injuries. It's like they think of that as a neck issue. Well, what's happening in your skull where your brain is not fixed? It floats in water.
I want to correct that. I actually did go. We had to because our car stopped or whatever. They took us to a local, we were in the middle of nowhere. They took us to this little tiny hospital, and he checked out the rest of my body to make sure I didn't have any broken bones. He quickly flashed my eyes, and that was it. I was done. And I thought, well, I'm fine. I walked away. So, you know,
well, I think you're
That's
fine.
very common.
But we can
so
see
it's not that I
evidence
didn't
years
go.
later.
It's that it wasn't taken very seriously because I walked away.
No, they still don't take it seriously. So when
and
we
ER
come back,
doctors have it.
when we come back, we'll talk more about it. I mean, we could talk on and on, but Dr. Chapek's new book, Concussion Rescue, out January 28th. He's going to have a new course coming out shortly thereafter.
I'm so excited about the course
University.
to help people with the book.
Stay with us. A resource to save your brain and your life.
If you're enjoying the Brain Warriors Way podcast, please don't forget to subscribe so you'll always know when there's a new episode. And while you're at it, feel free to give us a review or 5-star rating, as that helps others find the podcast.
If you're considering coming to Amen Clinics or trying some of the brain healthy supplements from BrainMD, you can use the code podcast10 to get a 10% discount on a full evaluation at amenclinics.com or a 10% discount on all supplements at brainmdhealth.com. For more information, give us a call at 855-978-1363.